Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg.
I'm Joel.
And today we are both here to talk about our favorite reads from 2021. I thought it would be fun to do this with Joel this year because you actually read more books than I did.
I read 75 books.
In 2021. I think I hit 70.
Probably more than I've ever read in my life.
Yeah, you did really, really well. But because of that and because I think he's fun, I thought it would be fun to do it together. I will do a separate video where I do also rants. I'm only going to talk about my top 10 here, and I'll talk about some worst reads probably in the Friday Reads video that I do this week. So let's start with, is there anything in your top 20, like leading up to your top 10, that you want to quickly cover?
In my top 20, number 20, my brother's husband,
Yes.
which I love this. It was a man whose husband died, and his husband was an identical twin. And so he goes back to Japan to meet his identical twin.
Yeah.
And it's actually really beautiful because they're identical, but he doesn't fall in love with the brother because that's not who the brother is. The brother is
They're very different
straight
people.
and separate and has a daughter, and it's absolutely adorable.
Yeah, this was one of my favorite reads of 2020. So I love that.
Then I went into some that Greg introduced me to, The Prettiest Star and The Prophets. Both were beautifully written. I absolutely loved them. Probably would not have ever picked it up if it wasn't for Greg. So one thing is Greg's channel has introduced me to a lot of books. Yes, he talks about them, but when I watch the channel and how much he loves them, it's like, oh, I should read that. That sounds really good.
Actually, that's one of the things that's been really nice about both of us reading a lot of books this year is that we get to talk about them. Like a lot, I think a lot of the books on this list we're going to have in common. So,
but it was hard to do a buddy read because they were read months apart.
Yeah.
And so one or the other has to not say a word.
And usually when we did read something at the same time, you were getting on the road, so you would end up further ahead than I was. Right. So you were usually the one who had to wait for me to catch up.
So I travel a lot, so audiobooks are perfect for me.
Yeah.
So.
What's
and
next?
then next in there is going to be The Color Purple and Passing. Both, I love the movies on both. I love the book on both. And that's a whole nother subject of movie versus books. But I loved them both.
We need to watch. It's been a long time since I watched The Color Purple.
I love that movie.
And I need to reread the book as well.
And then going into number 11 was A Charmed Defensive, recommended by Abby at Montana Book Company. And I absolutely loved it. It was a beautiful story where they introduced some personality defects, I think. And
one has anxiety and the other one has depression.
And how they work together with each other. And it's actually beautiful.
It is.
Beautifully written.
Really
I just
cute.
love that.
Yeah.
The premise is kind of like The Bachelor, which I overlooked, but they worked it in really well.
It feels like it shouldn't work because neither one of the characters feels like the type of person who would either work on that show or be on that show. But it somehow really does work, and it's a really cute book. It's not in my top 20, but it's close. It might be in my top 20, but it's not in my top 10 either, but it's really good.
That was my 20 through 11.
Okay. And then before we get into the top 10, I thought it would be fun to talk about some non-book things that we both loved from the year. The first one is, they're mostly TV shows and movies. It's a Sin, which we watched on HBO Max. That
Really
was
good.
really, really good. Definitely recommend that. The Great Pottery Throwdown, which
Loved
is
it.
also on HBO Max. If you like The Great British Bake Off, you would like The Great Pottery Throwdown. I had seen episodes last year. I'm trying not to include anything that was from a previous year. I had seen an episode that I tracked down online of The Great Pottery Throwdown, and then I couldn't watch the rest of it, couldn't find the rest of the episodes, and I kept telling him about it, and it was finally on, because there was a Raku episode in the first season, and I really wanted you to see it. So I'm glad it became available, and it really lived up to what I had seen. The Great Soul Food Cook-Off, which we actually have. We loved this show so much, we ordered a cookbook. Melba's American Comfort. She is one of the judges on the show, and she's an amazing lady. Great soul food cook-off is fantastic.
She has a restaurant in Harlem, which I can't believe we never hit when we lived there.
We lived in Harlem.
I know.
And we went to Sylvia's.
Yeah.
But never went to Melba's. Big mistake on our part.
But when we get back,
Yes.
top on our list, and Bluebird.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's going to happen. And then I watched a movie that I really like, Secrets and Lies, this year, so I'm just going to give that a bit of a shout out. Searching for Italy. Stanley Tucci's TV show.
Not based on the book,
No.
but very similar. It's kind of his life in food. And Searching for Italy was just different things in Italy that meant a lot to him.
Yeah.
Which hopefully we get to go in the next year or two. So we have some great places mapped out.
Yeah, it's just a really fun show. And it's a good companion to the book, but you don't need to do both.
No.
And then the final one is, I almost was trying to say we shouldn't put Taste the Nation because the show actually debuted last year, but you pointed out the new season is really, it's very specifically about holidays. So it's kind of different. So I think it counts.
I thought it was pretty awesome because it told me a lot about Hanukkah and other people's traditions I did not know.
Noche Buena. That was a fun
Buena.
episode.
It was really good. So it kind of prompted us to do a Hanukkah dinner on the last night of Hanukkah with next door neighbors.
That was a lot of fun.
It was beautiful and fun. And
Yeah, good food.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a lot. So Taste the Nation, check it out if you have not already. And then I think that takes us to our top 10.
To our books.
I do want to shout out, because my top 10 is really competitive. My top 15 is probably really competitive. So before we get into the top 10, I'm going to shout out 2 books that just barely didn't make my top 10. One is Hidden Valley Road by Robert Colker. There is no nonfiction in my top 10, which is a little bit surprising. But
I have 3 in my top 10.
But, we were talking this morning, and I think you said that what you tend to look for in a book is the same thing I look for, which is an emotional connection to it. And I think I just emotionally connected to novels more deeply this year than I did to nonfiction. But Hidden Valley Road came the closest in nonfiction, and then Zori by Laird Hunt is 11th place. So I'll talk about them more when I do the rest of my top 20. But do you want to go first or second?
For the whole list?
Let's do 10 first, and then we'll work our way through.
So my number 10 is
Here.
one that I loved. It was recommended by Montana Book Company. Was Work Like No Other. Virginia Reeves is a local or a Montana author, and she lives in Helena, teaches there at the college. And this book was really, really good. It made me think. The guy goes to prison, and it makes him think about his life and what he wants and his life choices. And it made me think a lot about some life choices. So that's what I got out of the book.
Yeah.
And beautifully written. She's awesome.
It is really beautifully written. And this is where, so we have not looked at each other's top 10. We've talked a lot. I think I could probably guess the books that are in your top 10. You could probably guess books that are in mine. So we might end up talking about that again later down the list.
Okay.
I have a tie for my top 10. You allowed, I talked to Joel. He agreed that I could put a tie in my 10. We make our own rules. So the first one is The Prettiest Star by Carter Sickels. That really packed a huge emotional punch. That was one of the first books I read in 2021. I read it really early in the year, and I just really loved it. I thought it's about a man who basically goes home to die of AIDS in the 80s. It's a small town. Where is it? Iowa or Ohio?
Ohio, one of those.
Something,
Midwest.
yeah. Apologies to anyone who lives in either of those states. But it's just, and it's so emotional, and all you spend a lot of time away from him in the first half of the book in the perspective of like the mother, the sister. You never really get the father's perspective.
Very, very little.
Very little.
Just a smidge.
But it's so emotional, and by the time you really do get back to the main character's perspective, I feel like you've avoided a lot of the melodrama of him dying, and it's really beautiful.
It is.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's been 30 years since AIDS came out, almost 40 years.
40. Yeah.
And I would say probably 3 or 4 of my books were HIV/AIDS related. I lived through that era, and it upset me so much. But I read it again with a totally different look on things. Still hit hard in the heart.
Yeah. It's that kind of book.
They were all that I read. That kind of a book, just totally moving. And these authors are great.
Yeah, they are. So that's tied for my number 10. My other one is The Prophets by Robert Jones Jr., which is funny because when I read this, I can't remember if I read it in January or February. I think I read it in January, and I was convinced that it had a really good shot at being my number one book of the year, and now it's tied for 10th place, which I think just goes to show the quality of the books that I read this year, because this is a really great book. And if you have not read it, I recommend it. It's about two enslaved men on a plantation who are in love, but each chapter kind of moves around the plantation and gives you different perspectives and really deepens the experience. And it's about kind of hypocrisies of how people make big deals out of things like homosexuality and how kind of artificial that is. But it's more than that. But yeah, beautiful book.
It hit 14 for me. I thought it was going to be in my top 10 as well.
Yeah.
Not that to diminish the quality of this book is beautiful. Some other books just moved me a little more.
Which is amazing because it's also his first novel. And I think am really looking forward to seeing what he does next. So that takes us to number 9.
Number 9, I have Soul of an Octopus.
Which we do not have.
Nonfiction. It is this woman who researched octopuses and wrote about them. And one reason why it stuck so high on my list is because it taught me a lot.
Really
I love animals. Any kind of an animal I love, and octopuses are really, really unique and fun, and it taught me a lot.
And before anybody comments, she clarifies in the book that octopuses is the plural for octopuses. It's not octopi.
Exactly. I have to correct myself with that.
Yeah, and we've gotten good at it. But okay, I know a lot of people were confused in the comments when I read that book, and that's in my top 20 for sure. It's top 15, I think. I haven't really settled my 10 to 20 through 10.
It's also a beautiful book. When you flip it, it has a little story graph on the pages. It's just stunning.
Yeah, it looks like an octopus just taking off. It's really cute.
Fun.
Yeah.
Check it out.
Yeah, definitely, because that's a really good one. My number 9 is here somewhere. Love Medicine by Louise Erdrich. I got this actually at her bookstore, Birch Bark in Minnesota. It's been sitting on my shelf for a couple of years. And then I did a buddy read with Britta this year where we read it. And this is a debut novel as well. And it is stunning because if you know Louise Erdrich's later books, they're all interconnected. Characters and families and news stories that happen in one book will pop up in other books. And what's really astonishing is that you almost feel like she had it planned from the beginning, because I had picked up with her works much more recently, and this was the first time I went back to her earlier work, and everything fits like this beautiful jigsaw piece. And she actually talked, I looked it up, and I think it was even in the afterword, she talked about how she didn't actually have it planned, but she just felt like the story kept growing for her and revealing itself to her. And it's really, really beautiful and well done. It's kind of hard to summarize because there are a lot of different characters and a lot of different plot lines. But if you know Louise Erdrich, it pretty perfectly sets off the career that she has had. And it's a really beautiful book. So that's my number 9.
Okay. I do want to throw out there that Doris from Aldi Books suggested Soul of an Octopus. So thank you, Doris.
Yes, thank you. Good call. I forgot that.
Beautiful book. Yeah. Number 8, I have Taste, My Life in Food. I mean, my life is food. I love food. It's different than Searching for Italy. It's kind of how he grew up and what he ate and what food means to him.
Searching for Italy is more about Italy, and he's just the kind of the voice for it. Yeah. And Taste is more about his life through food, and Italy happens to be part of it.
And who doesn't love Stanley Tucci?
I know. He's so good.
Yeah.
But this is definitely in my top 20, probably even my top 15. It's a really, really good book.
Fun book, funny as hell. I mean, if you know Stanley Tucci, you hear his voice in this book.
He's a charming man.
He's so charming and funny and sarcastic and
great sense of humor.
So, and some really great recipes in here.
Yes, and actually, I grabbed because I think one thing that speaks to both of us about this, I thought it was really interesting to talk about your life through food. So I wanted to grab Joel's cookbook.
My life through food,
because it's recipes, but there's stories in there as well. Yeah. And you know, he wouldn't do this, but I wanted to shout out. There's a link to this down below.
And I wrote mine before Stanley Tucci.
Yeah, that was our pandemic project. In like March of 2020, and who knew we would still be in it now. All right, my next one, my number 8 is... Oh, was there anything else?
Nope.
Okay.
That's good.
Wanted to make sure. My number 8 is The Bad Muslim Discount by Syed M. Masood. This is something that I mentioned in my video about books that I hope more people discover. I will put a link to that in the description box down below. It's a really funny book. It's a really dramatic book. It taught me a lot. It's lives that are very different from my own, and yet they really resonated very deeply with me. It's about Anwar and Safa, who both take very different paths to coming to the United States. He immigrates legally as a teenager. She comes illegally as an adult and has to sort of make a deal with the devil by marrying this man who is just awful to get there. And trigger warnings, she suffers a lot of abuse, and it is about their religion and their family and their status as immigrants in this country. It's a really, really good book. So I love it, and I hope more people... It bounced around my top 10 all year. In fact, this was actually higher on my list this morning, and I was telling Joel that I kept moving stuff around, and it did bump down, but that really doesn't mean anything against the book. It's a really fantastic book. So
It'll probably be on my 2022 reads.
I listened to it on audio, actually, and the audio is really
sweet.
good.
Okay.
So good way to do it.
All right, number 7. Oh, God. After Francesco.
I have a copy. I didn't grab it. Oops.
Well, you didn't know my list.
I didn't know.
Referred to me by Montana Book Company. And again, they are 100% batting average with me, or 1,000 batting average.
Yeah, I haven't recommended a bad book.
They have not. But After Francesco is this man's life after he loses his husband to AIDS. And it brought so much of my life into that, of being scared of AIDS, being growing up in that era of what to do and how to do it and how you get over losing people. And I lost a lot of friends, but it's never a husband, but it's just how you move on. And absolutely beautiful, heart-wrenching book.
Yeah.
And really good.
That's on my 2022 reading list. I want to try to get to it early in the year, but if I don't, that's definitely going to be in my June list, a pile of possibilities for Pride, because if I don't get to it by then, I think it's definitely going to be that. By the time Chelsea recommended it, I kind of headed into the reading slump, and I felt like a book about grief was probably not going to fit where I was at. But I still really want to get to it. That's definitely on my list. My number 7 is actually Passing by Nella Larsen, which we don't own a copy. I want to get a copy of that.
Yeah,
actually,
it's a beautiful copy too.
Yeah. And I really loved it. That's another one that kind of bounced around. It bumped at one point. It went out of my top 10, then it was back in the top 10. This morning it started out lower on the list, and then it kind of usurped the Bad Muslim Discounts spot. And what I really liked about it, and what ultimately put it in this spot, was that I really love how ambiguous it is. There are a lot of things that happen in that book that could be true, but could also not be true. Things could go down one way. And I thought that was really beautifully done. And I think the idea of like colorism and explorations of race have been done recently with like The Vanishing Half, but the fact that that's such an old book and it did all of those things so well, it's really beautifully written. I actually listened to it on audio. We both listened to it on audio. And it's just really beautifully done. And the writing is amazing. I really want to do another book by Nella Larsen in 2022. It's just a stunning book. And the movie's really good too.
And it came number 12 for me. We both read it, and then we did the movie, and I'm glad we did it that way.
That one, we actually managed to do relatively at the same pace.
Yeah.
Which was good, because there's a part in the book where one character's husband says something awful, and I think you came home from work that day, and I was like, could you believe what he said? And then the ending.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the end. No spoilers, but the ending. I was so glad that we were at the same place where we could talk about it at that time. So, yeah, great book, great movie as well. All right, and that takes us to number 6.
Number 6. I've read a lot of Frederick Bachman books. All of them are really, really good, but they didn't make them on top. But A Man Called Ove. Ove, I don't know how you...
I don't know.
Everybody does it different. My stepmother and I read it at the same time. We did a buddy read on it. And Ove is my father. He's this curmudgeon, charming, lovable man who just does the right thing for everybody.
This book.
No matter how bad it is, he does the right thing. The characters were all great, and it was funny, charming, sad, just beautiful book. One of my favorites. So
I really need to read that book, especially since both you and Lona talk about how much Ove is your father's. And I feel like I need to read it. But I know a lot of people really love that book. Even people who aren't huge fans of Frederick Bachman love that book. So I that's one I definitely need to check out.
I've also done Anxious People, Beartown, and the sequel to Beartown.
Yeah, you told me and I don't remember what the name of it is.
Beartown was really good, but it deals with rape. But that's not the point of the book, and that kind of pissed me off. It was up there for a long time, but then I've watched some other videos, and it's like, wow, they really don't. If you're going to write about rape, that should be the top thing and deal with that. But it wasn't. And it was more about sports and community. But the book I thought was good and well written, but it did not make my top 20.
Yeah. I need to. I have never read a Frederick Bachman book, but I think Man Called Ove would be
That's good.
where I would start.
Anxious People was really funny. Really, really funny. Just crazy.
And that one also has a TV show.
It
right?
does.
Yeah, so there's a TV show we need to watch.
And Beartown has a TV show subtitled, but we do want to get to them.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
what's yours?
we'll do that. My number 6 is Work Like Any Other. This is another one that started out, I think, in like 10th and then moved up, and the Bad Muslim Discount is the one that suffered. But I think when I was looking at my list this morning, I think this is a book that I've really thought a lot about, like kind of like what you were saying, since I read it. And I think Virginia Reeves' writing is just gorgeous. And the way she moves between characters and how empathetic the book is and how it really... It understands every single character and what they're doing, and I feel like there are so many things that she could have latched onto and made it sort of like a crutch for the book, or taken it in a different direction, and she doesn't. Like there's a dog on the cover because when he's in prison, Roscoe kind of works with this guy who trains dogs to hunt people down if they escape. And I feel like a lesser writer would have made that a huge part of the book, and it's just kind of a layer in this one, and that makes it so much more beautiful. Especially, and it kind of builds. I don't want to do spoilers, but like with Maggie, that's all I'll say. It's just a really beautifully done book.
And what happens with the dogs at the end is beautiful. Nobody gets killed, so that's what we loved about it.
No dogs die.
She treated the dogs beautifully, I thought, in this book, too.
And the people, because I feel like a lot of books, especially the wife character in this book, a lot of writers would just make her this really unsympathetic character who's clearly modeled to be sort of, not like a villain, but the person you don't like in the book. And she really wants you to understand why the wife does not visit or write Roscoe while he's in prison. And she wants you to understand why. And she does a really beautiful job with that. There's also a great element of race because there's a black man who works on the farm and helps Roscoe steal electricity from the power company. And he is treated much more harshly or punished much more harshly, even though it was Roscoe's idea and he just helped. And it's just a beautiful book on a lot of different levels. And I think that's why it climbed up for me. So that's my number 6.
Nice.
All right, top 5 now.
Top 5.
Top 5.
I think this is going to be in both of ours top 5, but The Rain Heron by Robbie Arnett.
Yes, we don't have our copy.
We've loaned it out and we don't have it back. Beautiful book. The characters were really well developed. I'm currently reading Flames by Robbie Arnett. And they're very similar and just quirky and weird and odd, but really, really well done. And Rain Heron is beautiful. I'll let you go.
So, you know what's funny? My number 5 is The Rain Heron. So we hit it in exactly the same spot. Yeah, it's a beautifully written book. It's funny because I expected it to be something very different from what it actually is, and it's a book that you go on a journey with, and it's unexpected, but it's really beautiful, and it stays with you.
Yeah,
I think you read it before I did. I read it in May or June, and I'm still thinking about it now. The premise of the book is something that happens really quickly in it, and I think that's where, because then it keeps going from there. But the premise of the book is that there are 2 women. One is living on a mountain, kind of isolated, and another woman who works for the government, and there are a lot of political things in the background. You can tell there's some kind of a war. You don't really know a lot of detail about it, but like this other woman is an officer of the army who comes in looking for this mythical rain heron, and she wants the other woman to help her find it. And that's the premise of the book, and that pretty much happens really quickly, and then it fans out from there in this really beautiful and unexpected way.
Yeah. The cover's absolutely beautiful, too. I think you liked it because the cover. The cover's gorgeous.
Because the Montana Book Company had, in their reading challenge for 2021, one of the things that you had to check off was pick a book by its cover. And as soon as Charlie recommended it, thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie.
As soon as they pulled it off the shelf and I saw the cover, I knew that was the book I was going to pick because of its cover, because it's just gorgeous.
Yeah.
Really pretty. And it's a great book. Number 4?
Number 4, The Day the World Came to Town.
I need to read that.
So the premise of it is on 9/11, true story. This is a nonfiction. On 9/11, when everything was going down, they landed all these planes, and the ones that were coming over into America from Europe had to land in Gander, Newfoundland. They tell you how to pronounce it. And the compassion of this town that takes in, the town's like 10,000 people, and they get another 7,000 that day.
Yeah.
People opened their homes, donated stuff. It took a horrible day in history and showed the good and how beautiful it was. And I mean, I cried so much in this book. There's actually a musical,
Come From Away,
which I would really like to see.
It's on Apple TV, and we're trying to plot out like when we're gonna dive into Apple, because there's like Coda, a couple of other things that we could watch. But yeah, I need to read the book and we need to watch the musical. I've heard a lot of good things about both. Did Lona or Leon read?
Leon, a good friend of ours here in town, she read it too, and she recommended it.
Yeah.
Actually, no, Flint Hills Books did in Council Grove, Kansas. Shout out to them. They were really beautiful people, and they helped me get a Father's Day present or a birthday present for my father, Bill Schneider, who is a Kansas State football coach.
Yeah.
And it was signed. And so the woman there just was great bookstore. They recommended it. And it just, the day I read the blurb on it in Instagram, I was crying. It's like, I need this book now.
I want to get to it in 2022. And then just about Flint Hills, so he mentioned he got his father's birthday present from them. They remembered, and on your father's birthday, when you posted about it on Instagram, they commented to ask if he liked the book.
Yeah.
I'm just really great people.
I am from Kansas. I spent a lot of time on Council Grove, Kansas, so that made it that much more important to get a book from them.
Yeah.
Great independent bookstore, and I would rather buy from them than any
corporate.
devil.
Yeah. And speaking of independent bookstores, so you have your Northshire bookstore. We actually planned this.
This is where it started for me. I met Greg in 2010. And he took me to Vermont, and we went, and he says, you got to go to this bookstore. So it's Northshire Bookstore in Manchester, Vermont.
Yeah.
And they have a cafe and a bookstore, independent bookstore. Beautiful, beautiful place. Great people, great. And that's kind of our dream, is independent bookstore and a cafe, and let us do our magic.
Yeah. But then, so I wore my Montana Book Company t-shirt because it's kind of how it started, how it's going. Because Northshire used to be my favorite bookstore, and I still love that store. But the one thing I would say is I couldn't tell you a single employee at Northshire.
No.
And the people from Montana Book Company have really... They have a really solid sense of community, and that's not to say that Northshire doesn't, but they really emphasize.
Northshire is huge, so they have at least 40, 50 employees. So.
Yeah, and so yes, that's absolutely true. And I wanted to wear this as well because 3 of the books in my top 10 were recommended by people from Montana Book Company.
4 of mine.
So that was your number 4, right? Okay, my number 4 is a surprise. It's The Yield by Tara June Lynch, because this was my number 1 book for a lot of 2021. up until about 2 weeks ago, this was still my number one read of the year. And I had this really profound experience reading this. This was about Reeves, the Book Maniac. And I just loved the book. I was reading it at this perfect time because it is about that there's a funeral and people are gathering to say goodbye. It's about Indigenous people in Australia. And at the same time, our foster son had a death in his family and we had to go to the reservation. So there was like this weird parallel in real life that went along with this that kind of really made it hit a lot harder. It's just a really beautiful book. And I'm kind of surprised that it ended up in 4th place. But I think what ultimately, everything in my top five, or at least the top 4, hit me really hard emotionally, and they just kind of edged this book out. But it's really fantastic and beautiful, and I love the cover as well. And Tara June Lynch is a beautiful person as well. So
on my 2022 reads.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in what you think of it. It's a very good book. So that takes us to number 3.
Number 3. Oh, The Inexplicable Life.
Oh, I didn't grab that
one. Oh, no.
I forgot it. Sorry.
By Benjamin Alir Sands.
Yeah.
It's about I don't think this is a spoiler. It's about a gay father who adopts a boy. The man's wife died, but he adopts this boy. And their connection is beautiful. Just lovely. And the father would do anything for the boy, and the boy just loves his father. And great character development in it. And oh my God, I just loved the father. He was so compassionate and wonderful. And it just really hit me hard that because I'm best friends with my father, so I understand the connection of father and son, and that was kind of the basis of it for me, and is beautiful.
I need to get to that one. I when you asked me about it, I told you. So I had read Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, and then when Inexplicable Logic of My Life came out, I thought it was a sequel, and I got really excited, and then it wasn't a sequel, so I didn't read it, and I really need to get over that and do it.
But it could be a offset of that because they knew the characters from Aristotle and Dante.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So,
okay.
It could kind of be a sub, but they don't really go into it too
much. There's an Aristotle and Dante cinematic universe. Oh, I love that. All right, and then my number 3 is Like a Love Story by Abdi Nazemian. This is another one that I love this book, so it's hard figuring out where to place things that you love that much. And kind of like what you were talking about earlier, these characters are not that much older than me, just a couple of years, and they are, 1989 when this book is set? And they are, there are 2 gay boys and a heterosexual girl. In the beginning, one of the boys is closeted, and he starts dating the girl, but then there's a romance between him and the other boy, so he kind of comes out over the course of the book. And they are discovering their own sexuality and dating in the time of AIDS, and they have to grapple with all of that and a lot of the political goings on. One is involved in ACT UP a little bit. He goes out to protests to try to get awareness of AIDS, and that's kind of my era. Like I was only a few years behind them, so you were kind of growing up and discovering your sexuality in a time when that felt dangerous, and it felt so. Everything that happened in this book resonated really deeply with me, and I love it so much. The audio is really great as well. I actually listened to it on audio. A lot of people were confused because of the cover, thinking it's a graphic novel. It is not. It is a novel. And the audio was really good. They had 3 different narrators, one for each of the 3 main characters. And there's also the uncle of one of the characters sort of looks over them and is almost like a mentor for them. And it's really beautifully done. And I absolutely love this book. So that's and I'm shocked that it's number 3. I really struggled with where to put it.
Well, it's number 2 for me. It is number 2 for me, all for the same reasons. I am in the age range of these kids, so it really brought me back to high school and dealing with HIV and AIDS at that time. I love the characters.
Every character's good.
Yeah. And part of the book was the gay uncle who I totally could.
Love him.
I loved him. Relate with, was trying to teach the kids about gay history, and he made flashcards of who Liza Minnelli is, who Judy Garland was.
Yeah.
All these old time people that young kids just did not know. So that part of the book really hit me, and I really liked. So I did a lot of searching, and I found the Queeriotic Table of LGBTQ, and it is there's novels and stuff, but this is really quick and short.
Yeah.
Kind of like the flashcards.
Yeah.
And this one will go into Madonna. Oh, they go into Madonna a lot.
A lot. Yeah.
And Lady Gaga. So this was a supplement to Like a Love Story that really went well together, and I loved.
Yeah, that was that was a good find. We found that at the tattered cover in Colfax.
Yeah.
So they had a really great LGBTQ section because that was something that you really were looking for. So that was a good find.
If you do have millennials or high school kids that are coming out gay, lesbian, transgender, queer friendly, that is a really good book to talk about where we've come from.
Yeah.
Stonewall and before. Just who helped the fight to get us here.
Because that's one thing I really liked about Like a Love Story as well, because I really think it is important to know where you came from, what your people have been through, and stories. Because there are a lot of commonalities, and you got to learn from these things. So I appreciate that as well.
2.
All right, so my number 2. This was really hard as well. It's Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World. So I didn't Discover the Secrets of the Universe this year. I read it a couple of years ago, and I had wanted to read it this year, and just the way things were going, it ended up not happening. And I had a complicated journey reading this because this came out right around the time we found out that what was going on with Guinness.
Right.
So I'll talk about it in like a Friday Reads because now we're on the other side of treatment for it. But we found out around October that Guinness has a nerve sheath tumor in his brain. And we didn't know if it was going to be possible to treat him. So if you saw that I hit a reading slump around that time, that is why. And the book that was hit by that was Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World, because it's a really great book, but I was just having a really hard time engaging with it because of everything that was going on. So I took a break from it, and then I came back to it in November, I think. And it was like the last 2 hours of the audio, which is read by Lin-Manuel Miranda, and he does a really, really, really great job with this audio. And all of a sudden, I just couldn't stop crying. It's like, so the experience I had with the ending of the book is everything I should have had in the first half. So I want to reread this again in 2022 because I just loved the ending, and it almost seems like it should be really cheesy because in a lot of the characters, it's sort of like the best case scenario. The parents are all really understanding. There's a really supportive friends group. There's a teacher who kind of steps in and really understands one of the boys at one point. So it almost feels like too much, but what really resonated with me is that that's the type of world I like to think we live in or hope that we will live in. It's kind of my best case scenario because these people who are not perfect, but are really trying. And that's how I like to look at myself, I guess. I ended up really, really loving it. And I had a very hard time deciding which one of these was going to be third place and which one was going to be second place. And I think it's the fact that this really reflects the world as I would like it to be, that edged it out for me and made it my number 2 read of the year. So, okay. What's your number 1?
Number 1. I had a 1. I had a 1 and a 1.5.
Yeah.
They really are Dante.
They really are.
He wrote this, and then many years later he wrote this, but it's volume 1, volume 2. Mm-hmm. And you actually tried to get me to read this, yes. And I think I read the first few chapters, and it's like I just wasn't into it.
Yeah.
And then I tried again this year, and I just couldn't stop. And then this came out, and we had to have it.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful story of 2 boys that meet, kind of a meet cute at the swimming pool, kind of how we met.
Yeah.
And how
Cafe, not swimming pool.
and how they navigate through life, the things that they want to do, and go to college, and they have different likes and interests, but they go to two different colleges, and they discover who they are here. And then it's really, if you know much about this, there's no spoiler.
Yeah.
They actually start dating in here.
Yeah.
So they understand who they are here and where they fit in the world here.
Yeah, because at the end of this book, it's a surprise in a way that they end up in a relationship at the end of this book, but there's no way of talking about the second book without spoiling that. Right. So,
and I absolutely love Benjamin Larsen.
Yeah, he's like a hug.
Yeah, he's a big hug. So I've done 3 books by him. I'm going to do one more, or whatever I can. He has a couple of novels, so I'm excited. I just love his voice when he's writes into this.
And the other thing I forgot is that this is set in the late 80s as well. They both are. So it kind of has that same element of this, although it's not. The AIDS is in these books, but it's not as prominent as it is in Like a Love Story. But it is about how, and this is something that I think young people today might not quite understand, how difficult it was to come out when being gay was so unacceptable in society.
Right.
Because that's something I struggled with. I know that's something you struggled with.
I am the age of these 2 kids. So me coming out was the same time they came out.
Yeah.
I struggled a little bit after high school, but they did it their senior year of high school. Yeah. So it made it a little easier. They grew up in El Paso, Texas.
I think so.
Little tiny town, both Latino. And one was more Latino than the other, and that was kind of their conflict in the books. And I guess they're just adorable.
Yeah, and one is a little more out and confident than the other one. So it's really, because I think that what's great about Dive Into the Waters of the World is, as you were saying, they really come together and form a relationship. And it's about, and this is something you and I can relate to. We started out as friends and then got into a relationship, and it's about, it's kind of that transition and how it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So
just a good love story.
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for that. So what the hell?
All right, so what do you think my number 1 is?
Well, I see it on I'm guessing Power of the Dog.
It is. So
I haven't read it, but it will happen.
And what's funny is, I mentioned, I think 2 weeks ago, that I had been going over my top 10, and there was a shocking change, and the shocking change was that this became number 1. Because I didn't realize how much I liked this book until I started working on the book versus movie post. We saw the movie, and then I started really digging in and comparing the book and the movie. And while I was doing that, it really just revealed to me how much I actually really loved this book, and how much I love everything that Thomas Savage did in the book, and how much is going under the surface, which shouldn't have been that hard to tell because I filled 2 index cards with notes while I was reading it. Ultimately, in the end, it felt like there was really nowhere to put this but first place for me, as much as difficult as it was, because I really loved The Yield. Any other year, that could have been my number 1. I really loved Like a Love Story, Aristotle and Dante, Dive Into the Waters of the World, The Rain Heron. I love all of them. And ultimately, it's just everything that's going on under the surface of this book that made it number 1 for me. And again, that was a huge surprise, because when I read it, I still thought The Yield, Like a Love Story, and Aristotle and Dante were going to be my top 3. And then as I was working on that movie post, I just realized how much I appreciated it. So.
I did not read the book, but I saw the movie, and thank goodness I had Greg, because there's a lot of stuff in the movie, or in the book, that's not explained in the movie. And I really want to read the book now, because I love the movie.
And I'm not good at shutting up and being quiet. So as we're watching the movie, I keep saying, like, there's so much more in this to this.
But it enhanced the movie for me because he shared that. So, but I will get to it, and I'm excited.
Yeah. So I'd be curious about what you think, because I did really love it, and I really loved all of these books. So good reading here.
Yeah, I had a really good year. Thank you for pointing a lot of these things out to me, and to Montana Book Company and Abby, and just everybody who suggested something. I really appreciate it. So.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to the 2022 reading year, and we'll see how that goes. This was a really good reading year. There were not a whole lot of duds at all. So hopefully we'll get some more of that. And what?
Oh, no. I had some good duds, but...
Oh, okay. I mean, there were duds for me,
Yeah.
but there was nothing that I would like throw across the room in anger, except Gone with the Wind, actually.
You
That
did
one.
throw something across the room.
Which one?
I don't know, but you threw one across the room.
Was that this year or last year?
Probably last year.
I can't remember, but
like,
you're right. I did, because I didn't warn you either. I just launched it across the room. So you're right. What was that? We're gonna noodle on this, and I'll figure it out. So, but anyway, as always, really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until then, Happy New Year and happy reading.
Thank you. Have a great New Year.